Today on Escape the Clock, I'll be diving into the question about whether our forever homes are actually the most underleveraged part of our plan. According to data released by the U.S. Census Bureau in 2023, the share of one-person households has more than tripled since 1940, meaning that 27.6% of all occupied homes in America now contain just a single person. We view the empty nest as the ultimate prize of independence, but from a balance sheet perspective, that empty bedroom is actually dead capital. It's an asset that bleeds money on taxes, insurance, and heating every single month without generating a dime of return. By insisting on living alone, we are choosing the most mathematically expensive lifestyle possible. On the show, I'm speaking with Annamarie Pluhar. She's the founder of Sharing Housing and the author of a guide on how to safely monetize that dead space. Stay tuned to learn how to vet a housemate like hiring manager and turn your biggest liability back into an asset. Welcome back to Escape the Clock, the show where we highlight strategies and approaches for achieving financial freedom and having the option not to work. I'm your host, Daniel C. Rogers. In America, there is the dream of owning a home. Many consider that making it. It was no different for me. I struggled to own two different houses when I lived in Ohio. And then when I moved to Washington State, I really wanted to do it right. So we picked a home we believed would last for 20 years. And 20 years later, we are still living there. And I love my home. We've done very well with it. We did take a mortgage and we decided to stay and pay it off. And all the while, I was making improvements and trying to increase both the livability and the value. But what if I'm actually misusing the space? What if every day that misuse is actually costing me money? I recently read a book called Sharing Housing, a guide to finding and keeping housemates, and it made me realize the importance of optimizing the space we live in. Every room, even areas like driveways and attics, these all have purposes and they come with value. But it's easy to neglect these areas, and doing so means we're missing opportunities. In my case, we bought a home that would work for my spouse and my two kids and have room for our dogs. And it's great. Every room was used and full of activity, but my son's moved out and now we've turned his room into a guest room. And it sits empty 80% of the year, just waiting for a chance to provide value. That problem's only going to get worse as soon as my daughter moves out, and eventually it's just me and my spouse. I think we treat privacy as the ultimate luxury, but the data actually suggests it's a health risk. Studies show that retirement increases the likelihood of clinical depression by 40%, largely driven by isolation. Yet we keep buying bigger houses, which only increases the cost of maintenance and the feeling of loneliness. Nearly 28% of American households are now single occupancy. And if you think marriage is a permanent hedge, look at the trend. Gray divorce rates have doubled for those over 50 and tripled for those over 65. Whether by choice or by circumstance, the default American blueprint is funneling us towards a future of maximum square footage and minimum human contact. But what if we could flip that script? Turn that room into money instead of cost. Reduce loneliness by ensuring that we have the right companion using it and the satisfaction to know that you're helping someone. Today's guest is here to explain why that isn't only the right framework, but should be a necessity in anyone's life plan. Annamarie Pluhar is a specialist in group dynamics with a background in corporate consulting and theology. She spent years facilitating cross-functional teams for Fortune 100 companies before realizing the same systems used to build high-performance teams can be used to build high-performance homes. She is the founder of Sharing Housing and the author of Sharing Housing, a guidebook for finding and keeping good housemates. Annamarie, welcome to Escape the Clock.
Thank you very much for having me.
Annamarie, you didn't start as a real estate investor, which I have to say we have a lot of those on the show. You started in a background in human systems, which I think is super cool, by the way. When did you look at the standard American model of solitary living and realize that it wasn't just an expensive proposition, but actually broken?
I think I knew it in my bones, which is to say that as an adult, I have spent almost my entire adult life living in shared housing. I started, like many people in my generation, living with friends in group houses, actually during college and then after graduate school. And in the 80s, I had an apartment that I adored in the Cambridge area. And it was a 4-bedroom house for 3 people. And I stayed there for 8 years. I was in my 30s. I was traveling a lot as a management consultant. And I just couldn't see spending all that money for a space for myself. So it's sort of basically in me. So I've been doing this almost all my life. And my parents modeled it a little bit for me too, because there were periods in my life as a kid when we would have people in the house.
So much experience. It makes sense that you're the expert to write the book on it. I could tell that when I was reading it.
Thank you.
I want to go into some of the financials first, because a lot of people here are interested in what does this mean to my financial independence? How should I be thinking about this? And, the data was really interesting when I was looking into it. Over 30% of income is spent on housing. That hit a record high of $19.7 million in 2022. And so housing is a significant liability line item on people's balance sheets. And as I was reading your book, I kept thinking about the opportunity that could be as well. Like we can optimize, we can make the most out of this.
Bingo. Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to start with the distinction though, because you start with kind of like defining some stuff. I think you have to do that because I think a lot of people have pre-notions of what they think when they think about this. So you're talking about shared housing, but there's also co-housing and cohabitation. So can you talk about shared housing and why that's like a specific business model that makes sense for an independent adult who's trying to figure out the math here versus some of these other ones?
Okay, so co-housing is the phrase used by a group of people, and it's specifically about creating a community of independent houses where everybody owns the property together. That's a very clear model, and they get a little upset when people call my model co-housing. Co-living is a word that's being used a lot. I'm quite comfortable with co-living. What was your other one?
Cohabitation.
Cohabitation. I think we tend to use cohabitation for people who are sexually involved with each other, partners, lovers, whatever. So we call that cohabitation. But what I am about is as simple as sharing a roof, living together under a roof. And then from there on, I say how it works depends on the people who live together.
If I had to boil it down to the simplest example, would having a roommate that you shared a roof with or an apartment with or whatever it was, that would qualify in your definition?
That qualifies. So let's do some nomenclature here, because I think no adult wants to have a roommate. And one of the things I say, so roommate is for camp, it's for college, and maybe for conferences, right? You share a hotel room. But adults can have housemates. And what I hope happens is that a housemate, somebody who starts out as somebody you may not know very well, becomes, over the course of time that you live together, a homemate. And that my definition for a home mate is somebody that you like and respect, whose ways of living at home are compatible enough that everybody, and please use the word.
You told stories in your book that made that clear. Like I was reading some of the stories. I'm like, actually, wow, I could see connecting with this individual if that kind of thing was happening.
Right. So that's the homemate sort of it.
Awesome. So now that we understand the difference, right, where you're talking about, like you'd have the privacy of your own space.
Absolutely.
Like we're not saying you're bunking with somebody here. You're not at camp. So we're talking about making use of, like I mentioned, I have this guest room. Somebody could use that. Someone might need that, right? Mm-hmm. That could make sense. So let's talk a little bit though about what does that mean when it comes to the bottom line? You talked about utilities, and I actually really love how you described and broke that down. Like you've really dealt with this, I could tell.
Thank you.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. So beyond just rent, like where do you see some of the savings coming when it comes to utilities and maintenance and stuff like that?
So what I tend to tell people to do, so there's what I call the householder. That is the person who either owns the house, has the mortgage, or has the lease, right? Versus the home seeker, somebody who's looking for a place to live. And what I suggest to householders is when they figure out how much they're going to charge for rent, that they include the utilities in that cost so that, and I tell them to think about a year, because I actually had a friend say to me, Annamarie, I forgot to think about heat when I set the bill. And I'm like, yeah, right. So Take a look at all your utilities over the course of the year, what your costs are, divide by 12, and then figure out how much of that you want to add to a rent, okay? And so that you're not nickel and diming a housemate for electricity and heat and all that kind of.
See in your frameworks, which we'll get into more as we go through this, but you try to make it easy.
Right.
Easy is kind of the magic, right? You just want it to be easy for everyone. I like that. But what happens when, like, you know, my property taxes go up, or there's these surprise things that happen, which becomes this financial crisis moment that a lot of families end up dealing with? Does that become a all hands meeting where the housemates are kind of coming together?
I think it depends on the relationship that you have with the people. I mean, it truly, if your property tax goes up significantly, then maybe you might want to renegotiate what you're asking your housemate to pay you, or not, as the case may be. In my case, you asked, I have a housemate, and I am comfortable saying that right now he's paying 90% of my mortgage.
Wow.
That's pretty good. Right? So I'm not particularly worried about taxes going up right now because I've got a good arrangement. And I also think I have a housemate who's generous, who has money, that if I were to turn to him and say, hey, things have changed a little bit, would you be willing to spend $100 more a month, $200 more a month? He'd probably say fine. In his case, this is situational.
As you're talking about that, it's making me think that we all have different needs and abilities to help each other. Someone might be better off financially, but might be feeling a little bit more socially disconnected.
Right.
And someone else might have a great like social ability and network that they could bring to that relationship, but might be more hard up to hit the rent. Yeah, I can see how that could really work.
Changes for people. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see that being solving so many problems, but you have to find the right person, which I want to get into in a moment. Before we get there, though, I want to ask, like, there is a cultural stigma around living with somebody when you're older, if you're not in a relationship with that person.
Yes.
I know finding stigma is something I deal with on this show. I'm talking about things like this. I hate the idea of retirement. I hate that word, but this idea that, you know, you're just choosing not to work because you're done working. You don't want to work. That's not a bad thing, but there is a stigma against it. We're talking about money can be stigmatized as well. But how do you help people get past that?
Well, I'm working on changing the culture by doing podcasts like this.
Oh, there you go.
Seriously, because more people need to hear the story that it's possible to live with others. And one of the things I've discovered as I do this work is that many people live in shared housing. They don't talk about it. It's just the way they live. And I've had people, when I say, well, can I interview you? They go, oh, yeah, I guess so. Because it is just the way they live. You never hear the stories of people for whom it is a successful relationship. And you hear bad housemate stories, but you don't hear the good housemate stories. So I think the more we can tell these stories, the better off it is. And the culture is changing. There have been a whole bunch of pieces lately about women getting together. It tends to be women getting together and saying, hey, we're going to live together. We're going to, combine our force here. There's a Korean book out now about two women who just bought a house together, an apartment together. So culture's changing. I think you just say, well, there's maybe a stigma, but I'm going to be smarter than that.
Yeah, and there's a cost by allowing stigma to drive your life, for sure.
Right. It never even occurred to me that there was a stigma because I've done this all my life.
Sure, yeah.
And early on, I had somebody write to me who said, I'm too proud to admit that I need a housemate. And I was like, what? Oh. And I wrote a piece, Pride? Really? So it's about what you care about inside.
Pride is one of the most dangerous things. It's one of the reasons people won't talk and ask for help when it comes to money as well.
Yes.
So it can be tough.
Yes. And the fact that money is secret in our society as opposed to transparent.
Yep. I
am for people being transparent about money.
Yeah. And you do a good job in your book saying, here's some tools like on how to be transparent, like to make it so it's less awkward when we talk about these things. So I just want to ask, though, about the sense of someone playing a landlord. And what I'm getting at here is I rent a place out and I try to make sure it was affordable and accessible the people who need it. But I do have to be a landlord now. I have to think about, am I going to get the rent? What do I do? Do I have to evict somebody? That's stressful. Some people don't want to be in that role. So do you see this as a smaller role of someone being a landlord, or both people acting like landlords under a shared roof? Or is it different enough from that?
I think it's different, but it's similar. Okay. There's no question that there's a power arrangement. The person who's the householder has the power. We'll get into talking about how we mitigate that.
Yeah.
I think that you make a clear agreement about how you're going to live together, and from there on, it's a relationship. It's how do you want to fix this? How do you want to deal with this? I think what's different from when you're really a landlord of a different piece of property, you don't see what's happening on a regular basis. So it feels a little bit more intrusive to go and say, hey, I'm going to fix this for you, or I need to be there. Whereas when you're under a roof together, you all see it.
Let's talk about how do we find the right person, because a lot of the book is focused on that. And I actually think that's probably where you should be spending the time, because this can be very difficult and it's counterintuitive for how people act when they select a housemate. And you kind of get into that. Don't look for a best friend. So why is actually looking for friendship a trap here? And why should you be more focused on just compatibility?
Because you have friends for all kinds of different reasons. And not necessarily would the friend be a great housemate. And the extreme sort of case study thing I could come up with is you've got this friend who you really like because she pulls you out of yourself and takes you, and you go out and eat fancy dinners together. And you love that because she gets you to do that. But the truth of the matter is she's completely irresponsible about her finances and all of those fancy dinners she puts on her credit card. So when you live with her, she's not being careful about money, and that becomes a bit. So friends, I'm not saying that you can't live with your friends. What I'm saying is you should make sure that you're compatible enough in how you live in your home that you'll be comfortable.
To be honest, I don't think I'd want to put my friendships at risk like that. I think I'm a great housemate. I'll be honest. I think I'd be amazing, but I think I would be on them. I don't think they'd enjoy that.
I mean, I have some friends I could live with. I'd be really happy to live with. And I have other friends that I'm very clear I would not want to live with.
You also talk about this danger of ignoring the can't live withs. And you kind of divide these things into categories, which I thought was really useful. But what are some red flags when you are looking for someone that you should go, okay, I'm going to walk away from this person. This isn't worth my time.
One of the things that's different about the process from, say, a real estate ad is I want people to get clear about what they must have in their home to be comfortable and what they cannot live with in their home to be comfortable. And some people are very clear about the things like cat allergies and smoking and drug use and alcohol and that sort of stuff. But I'm also wanting people to dig a little bit. And the way I discovered this is I don't like TV. And so my ads always say no TV. And that's like very countercultural in this world. In the 80s, when we had ads that were 27 words, because that's what you paid for the local progressive paper, we'd say no TV. And we'd end up getting 7 or 8 phone calls, and one of those people would. Whereas the other group houses I knew about would be dealing with 70 and 80 applications, huge interview process, and so on, because they hadn't made clear what it was that made their house special. And I'm with my hands, I'm trying to make fences, right? So must-haves and can't live with are guardrails. And I mean, I have a story, which is that my current housemate, when we were on the phone talking after a couple of email things, this was our first conversation, he said, wait, what's this business about no TV? This might be a deal breaker. And I said, inside me, I go, uh-oh. And then I said, well, I really don't like the sound of television. It's true. And he said, well, how do you feel about sports?
Interesting.
And I said, what kind of sports? And he said, football and golf. And I went, oh, that's fine. Because my now deceased partner, that's what he watched, was football and golf, specifically. So it was sort of like a feeling of like, okay, this guy is sort of part of the world that I already know, right?
It was great that you went deeper than just the face level of it.
Right. I went deeper. Exactly. And this turns out to be true. And I've learned a whole lot more about football in the last 3 months than I knew before. And I'm having fun.
I do think people do react quickly to small amounts of information presented to them and sometimes miss the nuance. And I do think that's why I want to get into this, your framework for how do you start this process, which is there's a lot of great platforms for soliciting that we would be looking for a housemate, right? So many options. In your framework, you describe it as writing repellent for the wrong people rather than magnetizing towards the right people, which is counterintuitive, I think, for a lot of how people would approach it. They're almost do it like a dating ad. Like, let me see how attractive I and my home could be for you, or how attractive I am to come into your home.
Right.
But like you argue that's maybe the wrong way to do it. Can you go a little bit deeper into the dangers of doing it that way?
You're looking for a right person, not the right person, because I think there are many right people. But you're very clearly not looking for people who won't fit. So that's why you're trying to create guardrails around this process. You asked about red flags. One of my first red flags, if I'm writing an ad or helping somebody else write an ad or an announcement, I will always sort of say, to respond, please tell me something about who you are and what you're looking for. So if I get an email response that says, when can I see the room? I have very clearly not been read.
Yeah.
And this person hasn't responded to what I have put out there. And so that's a red flag.
Yeah, communication may not flow in the future if it's not flowing when you start.
Oh, and I have a very good rule, which is the way things start is the way they continue. Yeah. So you don't assume, oh, I can get over that. I didn't like that. I'm going to get over that. No, you say, oh, I didn't like that. This is not going to work.
It might even be worse because usually people are putting more effort in the beginning.
Exactly.
And then you're going to get the tougher version later.
Exactly. And I've got stories people say of people who interviewed and said, heard something they didn't like, and they said to themselves, oh, I can deal with that. And it turns out they can't.
When someone's looking for someone, they might have, at least my listeners have already figured out, okay, I'm looking to have this type of savings. I need to make sure they have an actual income. It's reliable. I do not want to have to deal with money like that. I just know that I need to shave off $900 a month, going forward, and it just needs to be reliable. How do you verify things like income and reliability and stuff like that without making it awkward, like a bank audit, like you're saying, open up this, again, taboo topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about?
A couple of different answers to that at the same time. I do know people who say, I need to see your bank statement. It's fair. I also am very big on reference checks. And one reference check for somebody who is working is to call their supervisor. In fact, I encourage that. A good employee will have a supervisor who says, sure, fine, I'll talk to them. A bad employee will say, oh, I can't possibly ask. So that's a red flag. By talking to that supervisor, whether it's whatever level it is, you're verifying their place of right as well. So those two things, I think, take you a long way down the pike on that. The other thing is, I do always say, as long as the law allows it locally, you're asking for first month, last month, and a security deposit. That's a chunk of change. If they can't come up with it, that should be a red flag. You're not a charity unless you're choosing to be a charity. But as long as you're not a charity, you want to have the security deposit the last month and the first month.
That makes a lot of sense. As I rent places out, that's a very standard approach, right? People shouldn't be surprised if they've ever rented, like in a normal situation. That shouldn't be too bad to be asked to do that. I had seen this research from the Journal of Social Development Sciences that indicated that the most frequent causes of shared living conflict are instrumental issues like cleanliness and noise, not like deep personal clashes. So assuming you find someone you actually have compatibility with, how do you deal with this other stuff, like policies,
So let's get clear on what compatibility is.
Sure.
Because I'd love to see that research you found, because
yeah, I can send it to you. It'll be in the show notes as well.
Because when I want people to have a compatibility conversation before they agree to live together, when they're in the interviewing process, they've gotten far enough down that they know that must-haves and can't live withs are working out and other stuff. And then they sit down and they have a conversation about cleanliness, neatness, kitchen use, guests, noise, tasks, bills, climate. And what do you like? What's important to you? What's not important to you? And they have this conversation before they've agreed to live together, because these are the nitty-gritties that take a relationship apart. And this is when they can either go, oh, okay, no, this is not going to work, and walk away, no harm, no foul, or, oh, we're different about this, how are we going to manage it? So that's really key and really important, and it's important to do before they agree to live together, because once they've living together, the householder has the power and the home seeker doesn't. So as long as they're talking before they've agreed to live together, their power is equivalent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe we could argue that they were researching people who hadn't figured out compatibility matches, and then they were having the consequences of lack of compatibility being a lot of these things, so they hadn't worked out,
right,
a good model. And you had lots of models in the book. I was wondering, though, as I was looking through it, and it's sort of like a scenario that could come up is imagine, you're living with someone and they're dating somebody and their boyfriend is staying over often, maybe more often than you'd prefer. And the boyfriend is maybe not someone you're super compatible with, but your housemate's great. Yeah, what do you do about situations like that where now another person's involved?
Yeah. So I have a principle which I call do it while it's easy, which is you speak up before something becomes a big deal. And a lover, somebody who is spending the night in your bed or in your housemate's bed, becomes a de facto housemate. So I get this from somebody I interviewed who's actually in the book. After 3 nights, what's going on? How's this working? How is this person going to contribute to the household? Because they're using hot water, they're using light. Are they eating? How are they eating? It shouldn't be a difficult conversation. If it is, that's a problem. But it should just be a conversation with the housemate who's already there going, yeah, you don't like him? Or whatever it might be, or they may like them a lot. But this is a de facto housemate, and it's an adjustment for the household. And some cases I know about, the couple start spending more time at the other person's house.
Yeah.
Or not, as the case may be. But it needs to be an open conversation, because otherwise it's just resentment, and the relationship's going to break up. The housemate is going to break up if you don't do.
The golden rule comes into effect.
Absolutely.
Always keep it easy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I imagine to make this work, communication is really critical. You would have been a great project manager, by the way.
Thank you.
Like in my field, like this is how you do it. You think up front, you have a model, easy frameworks for people. You try to make it just flow, and you have mitigations in place for, do you think what might go wrong? What would I do if it does? And if it does go wrong, what do we do? Let's just deal with it. So I think this is great. I can see how this could definitely work for anybody. I want to talk about the risks of not doing this for a moment, though, because we're seeing a lot of data about this public health epidemic. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Surgeon General actually declared a loneliness epidemic, stating that it carries a mortality risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Bingo.
That's what they were saying. So there's this isolation tax that people have been feeling, which I think is impacting them not just mentally, but also financially. But you do see people who refuse to consider shared housing. So do you see this as how I'm starting to see it, as a long-term price that our entire society is going to pay? Like, it seems like you see the solution right here and you're trying to get people on it. But let me ask more specifically. There's a lot of introverts in the world. I am an introvert. And what I mean by that is I am someone who really likes, I recharge differently. I like my privacy. I'm very quiet. It doesn't mean I don't like you. I will talk to you. I will be very engaged with you, but I definitely need some boundaries. How do you see people that are more maybe in those personality types who desperately need this? Otherwise we will wither on the vine, but might be feeling it's not a natural process for them.
So there's a lot of different pieces in what you just said. I'm well familiar with introverts and extroverts. I lived with an introvert for 23 years, and I am a very extroverted person. So It is possible for introverts to live in shared housing and have their own space. Your room is always your own. And what I like to see happen, if it's possible, is for adults to have more than one room that's their own. So a bedroom, a bathroom, and a sitting room.
An office. Yeah.
And that's possible in a lot of different houses. So let's start there. Your room is your own. That's the way an introvert gets their privacy. All people need social connection.
Absolutely.
Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you do it differently. And that's part of the really interesting thing about the research that's coming out around social isolation. To say a really big thing that I haven't said out loud, but I've been trying to think about how to write it, is I think our country is in the place we are in right now because the number of who've gotten themselves socially angry, because we are not wired to be disconnected, or let me say it the other way. We are wired to connect. I mean, literally, our brains are wired. The pain of loneliness strikes the same part of the brain as the pain of hunger and thirst. We are supposed to be in communion and connection with people, and we used to live in tribes of 50 to 200 people. We saw people all the time, every day. This idea of being alone even for 24 hours was, that was punishment. You excommunicated somebody. You sent them out. Solitary confinement. This is a punishment. And it's a very strange place we've gotten in society. And it's a natural progression, single family houses, divorce rates, people living by themselves. But if I get to do the thing I really want to do long term, people will eventually say, we'll look at each other and go, well, why do you live alone? So that it's strange and unusual.
As you were talking, it really made me think about, I have two younger brothers. Mm-hmm. One of them is very self-isolated, and there's a lot of reasons he kind of got to that point. But he's an adult. He's not a child. He's a full-grown adult. No relationships in his life, like never dated. And I think what I see happen there, and I won't talk for everyone. I don't make generalities, but I can say with my brother that connection, that need for connection, is still present, even though they're not really satisfying it in a normal way that we would consider. And so things fill it, and things sneak in there. And of course, it's easy to go online and consume information.
Bingo.
And so we see that happening. I think that's a very real cost. Having more people in your life, they can kind of kick us in the bottom when we're saying and doing things. They hold us accountable. Yep. They can help us grow as individuals. There's a lot of stuff there. And actually, there's a great book that talks about the 5 types of capital, and social is one of them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And that's why I've been talking about this on the show. Like, if we over-index on money all the time and we miss the whole point of life, then we just did this wrong, right?
Bingo.
The whole idea here is money is a means to an end. It's to get our time back so we can live our lives the best way that we can live them.
Right.
So I have a question now as a follow-up there, which is, like, you can do all the pre-mitigations in the world and find the best compatible person, but look, they can change, and that's okay. But maybe they become political in a way that isn't very compatible with you, or religion or something. What do? What's the protocol when you get to a point where you both agree, you know what, this is a good time to maybe end that shared housing arrangement? No one did anything wrong. You're just at a point where you're just realizing you're not super compatible anymore. Do you have a protocol for how to do that? Or is that just a conversation, a natural thing that happens?
It's conversation. What I do say is that that it's over when you don't want to go home.
That's a good sign.
That's a really good sign. But mostly adults, they'll figure something out. I mean, I have a little ebook that I'm working on right now to sell for $2.99 on my website. And I did a follow-up interview of a woman who had been living in the I wanted to call it au pair apartment, the ADU, the in-law apartment of her friend's house. And there came to be a point when actually the woman fell in love and wanted to move out, but she wasn't sure how she was going to tell her friend that she was going to be leaving. And her friend was also kind of going, I need my son to move in here. I don't know how to tell her to move out. So there it was. And they worked it out, and they're friends still and all of that. So I think that adults can take care of themselves and help each other out. And when it's over, and you move on. And sometimes people stay friends with their housemates, and sometimes they don't.
You had actually mentioned you wish you had stayed in contact with some of the ones that you couldn't remember.
Yeah, I've lost touch with some of them. Not all of them, but some.
It's a great networking opportunity, that's for sure. A lot of people, like, how do I meet people? This would be a way.
One of the things I wanted to say when you were talking about your brother is I saw a film recently, which I recommend. It's called Join or Die. It's a documentary about Robert Putnam's work and how he discovered social capital and the importance of social capital. And it's really wonderful. And his point is we need to join clubs. So maybe not everybody's ready to jump into sharing housing, but they need to show up and be with other people around something.
Yeah, plus one to that one. That actually is really good one to consume. Bowling is not something I really thought was a great social activity, but it has come back and it's become a really great way for people to get together. I play billiards. That's my thing. I like playing pool, and I play twice a week.
I wish we were local.
I love it. Love it. So there was a study by the Population Reference Bureau that's found that older adults who maintain strong social connections have only a 4% risk of dying in a 5-year period, compared to those who are isolated having a 57%. So it is a crazy jump when isolation continues. And look, maybe people are going like, why are you still hammering on this? We get it. There's a financial thing, there's a social thing. But in the book did a wonderful way of saying, look, this works almost any dynamic. You even talked about single parents and shared housing, creating this kind of like recreate a family feeling. Can you talk more about that? Because I think that's interesting. I think there's going to be people like, well, that wouldn't work for me because I have a kid or whatever it is. Like, why? How could this work for them?
Oh, I would love to see single parents join forces. It's a lot of work to raise children.
Yeah.
And in fact, I talked about tribal economy, a tribal life. Grown-ups did not take care of children in our tribal world. The girls took care of the babies, So we're sort of backwards and upside down about a lot of stuff. So if single parents can get together and they have the same ideas around childhood discipline and stuff like that, then they have a built-in babysitter. They have a playmate for their child. They have somebody else to help cook dinner. They have all this kind of benefits of having another person around. And I think it's in my book. Single parents decided to live together and their kids liked each other enough that they rearranged their custody times so that the kids would be in the house together with each other.
Wow, that's cool.
It just makes sense. Depending on how good the relationship is, it can grow into feeling like, this is my brother, this is my sister. I live with them.
Yeah, that sounds powerful.
Right?
2 more questions for you, and then you've been very generous with your time. So I want to make sure you have a chance to tell people how to connect with you on this. But if you could go back in time, start your journey all over again, what's the one thing that you'd be like, okay, one big secret you would tell yourself about doing this?
What would I say to myself? I would have avoided some of the bad housemates.
Yeah, sure.
Because I got much smarter about how to do the the whole process.
No, it sounds like you're at a point now where you kind of like me when I wrote my book. It's like, this is all the learnings here. You're not seeing the mistakes. Right. Like, here's the guide of how to do it all right. Just go do it right. That's kind of how your book came across to me. Like, you have some cautionary tales in there for sure. But I think the models were there about that came from a learning. That was like, you just a trip on that.
Right. This was me. I actually wrote the outline for the book in 2 hours. I just did a brain dump.
Yeah, it's funny. My book, it's a comprehensive financial guide, and they're like, "Wow, it must take it forever to write that." Like, it took 4 months, and most of that was because the publisher was slowing me down. But the truth is, I had written 80% of that just straight, right? Because it was all in my head. I just knew it all. And then, of course, I had to spend that last 20% was a lot of work. So I had to go verify I didn't get the math wrong. I had to make sure the research back to all that stuff. But anyways, I get that. When you live it, you can teach it for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
So if there's someone still on the fence after all this, what would you tell them they should do? What's the first step they should be taking today?
I would love them to sign up for our newsletter. So at sharinghousing.com, I have my website. I also have a website, sharinghousing.org, and we're going to clean that up pretty soon. The newsletter, I try to send out something once a week because I want to percolate the idea for people, because I think it takes a while before people can go, oh, maybe I could do this. So I do blog posts about people living in shared housing, other ideas about, I offer a Q&A. People can come, that's free. People can come to the free Q&A. I've got books, I've got classes and all of that kind of stuff, but it's all on sharinghousing.com.
Thank you so much, Annamarie. Like, this has been a very lovely conversation.
Good.
I will, like I meant after I read your book, it did make me start thinking about maybe I should update my plan a little bit. Like I was actually talking to my spouse. We have a plan to build a home, and we're like, we'll definitely need to make sure there's a space there.
Great.
And it might not be attached. It might be a detached thing. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out, but we're thinking about it.
I will say that sometimes it's hard to live with a couple, so I like your attached idea.
We want to make it easy. And she wants to do a bed and breakfast.
Uh-huh.
She wants to cook breakfast every morning and talk to people. And I'm like, I might be in the basement. She's like, great. You could do that. So yeah, I appreciate it.
You'll figure it out.
I will figure it out. Figure it out for sure.
Okay.
But thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Speaking with Annamarie, I really appreciated how she used frameworks and systems to challenge the way we think about modern housing. We're taught that bigger is better, but that truth disappears the moment you look at a housing balance sheet. Heating, furnishing, and maintenance are constant costs for space that often goes completely unused. The reality is that over 30% of income is now spent on housing. There's a constant debate about whether a home should be considered a liability or an asset. We live in it, and we hope that it grows in value, but the day-to-day cost of home ownership can be staggering. A leaking roof, a broken heater, or rising property taxes, those things do not care about your appreciation schedule. It is expensive to own a home, even if it's gaining value. Knowing that, wouldn't it be best to get the most out of that asset? I spent my career looking for ways to optimize complex systems, yet I lived in a housing model that was fundamentally inefficient. I improved my personal living experience, but I ignored the idle capacity in the attic, the shed, or even my driveway. And look, there are apps out there that you can use to rent out that extra space. But the real breakthrough really comes from sharing the roof itself. We're living in both a housing crisis and a social crisis in the United States. And Annamarie is pointing toward an answer that we can actually use. Imagine the people out there that are struggling just to make rent. Now imagine that empty guest room in your house that is currently only a line item on your expenses. There's a massive win-win there if you can find the right person. And that's the magic in Annamarie's models. She treats housemate selection like a professional protocol. Doing this right is a payday, but doing it wrong is a complication you do not need. And that's where she really leans into the decades of experience she has doing this to help people try to get it right. And did you notice how she downplayed the idea of living with your best friend? She contrasted companionship with compatibility, a distinction most of us miss when we're looking for a housemate. It starts with a shift from looking for roommates to finding housemates through a rigorous vetting process. And we have to move away from vague ads and start writing postings that can actually repel the wrong people. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of noise out there and we got to get past all that stuff so that we can get the right matches. And if you're 100% honest about your can't live withs, then you're protecting your future peace. And when this works, single parents can find a village, or children can find new connections, and lonely adults can find the community they need. It can bring us all closer together and help us get ahead financially. All of this moves you closer to a life where you finally escape the clock. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think would make an ideal housemate? Email me at contact@escapetheclock.com or leave a comment wherever you listen. I'm Daniel C. Rogers. Thanks for listening, and best of luck building community and escaping the clock. I'll catch you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Remember, while I'm not yet a financial planner, I am getting my degree in wealth management. You should take anything you've heard here as tips and advice to making your plan. To learn more, visit www.escapetheclock.com. There, you can find the book, resources, including the planner, and you can even schedule time with me. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.